Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In today's video we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election, specifically in Pennsylvania, in part of a new kind of mini-series of videos I'll be doing on the most competitive states and looking at whether or not they can flip. So for this video, we'll be talking about whether Donald Trump can flip Pennsylvania and what that would look like if he can do that. So we're just going to get right into it here and talk about the importance of Pennsylvania to start out the video. So obviously, we're just going to kind of characterize a pretty generic electoral map here. The states that I think would likely or be solid for Biden, I'm just going to fill out for starters, and then we're going to do the same thing for Trump. And what you'll notice is that obviously no candidate really has anywhere close to 270 safe electoral votes, but Joe Biden does start out with a pretty significant advantage. So he's going to get 241 safe electoral votes. Trump's going to get, I don't know how many, but he's going to get a good amount less, although I will give him Texas and Florida to kind of bolster him. But when you look at, as you can see, his tally here is going to be 260 or 219. He needs to, find a way to catch up to Biden because he's already trailing Biden. And if Biden wins, say, Georgia and Pennsylvania, he's the president. And so that makes Biden's path easier than Trump's because Biden has to win more states and make up less ground. So to combat that, Donald Trump can win Pennsylvania. And if he does that, he blocks off a lot of Biden's easiest paths to the presidency, and he makes Biden win states that voted to the right of the nation in 2020. So, for starters, every state on this map that I have left blank was at best for Joe Biden, D plus 2.4 in Nevada, but that's arguably the most right-trending state that I've left blank. And behind Nevada, the best state for Biden in 2020 was Wisconsin, which he won by 0.7. So, as you can see here, four of these five states did vote for Joe Biden, but they weren't spectacular victories, and they're very much up in the air for 2024. So let's say Trump wins Pennsylvania. Biden will give him Georgia, and he can even win Arizona. But if he doesn't flip North Carolina, and if he loses Nevada and Wisconsin, he's not the president. And by the way, if he's losing Pennsylvania, he's probably already lost Wisconsin. He's probably in trouble in Nevada and potentially Arizona or Georgia. So that's why Pennsylvania is important. I would say it's Democrats need it more than Republicans, but obviously it's hard for Trump to win the presidency without Pennsylvania because he'd have to sweep. I guess he could lose Nevada, but that wouldn't really happen. But he'd have to sweep essentially all these remaining states, and Nevada would be rendered irrelevant. But he'd have to win Wisconsin, win Arizona, win Georgia, and win North Carolina. And I think North Carolina he can win, Wisconsin he can win, but Arizona and Georgia are pretty hard lifts for him. So that's why Pennsylvania is really important. It's arguably the most important state in the Electoral College. That's at least what I think. When you look at how it alters the path to victory. And, if you told me who wins Pennsylvania next year, I could probably be pretty sure that candidate would win the general election. So Pennsylvania is really important. And today we'll be talking about whether it can flip. Obviously, if you watch my most recent prediction, you'll know that I have it as lean Joe Biden. So I think he wins it by a little over 2% as of right now. But today we're going to talk about a scenario in which Donald Trump would win Pennsylvania. And for starters, we're going to look back at the 2020 map, and you'll notice that Joe Biden did a pretty good job here. Clinton lost the state by just under a point in 2016, and when you look at the shift map, Biden did improve in most counties, specifically in the more important ones. So in the Philadelphia suburbs, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware, which are these three counties right here, all swung towards Joe Biden. Chester by the most, nearly 8%, but Montgomery and Delaware by pretty good amounts as well. And Biden also did pretty well in this kind of New Jersey border region. He flipped Bucks, or he didn't flip it, but he did, Clinton won it by half a point in 2016, and Biden did 3.5 points better than her. He did flip Northampton County, which, again, as you can see, he only won it by 1,200 votes, so that was very close. It didn't really do too much to help him win statewide, but it was an important flip because, again, Trump won this county by over 4% in 2016. And he actually did outperform her in Lackawanna County, which is where Scranton is. And Scranton is obviously a city that, as you might expect, was very Democratic historically, but has been trending right. Obama won this county by close to 20, if not more. I don't know exactly how much, but he definitely won it by at least double what Biden did. And Biden outran Clinton by a little bit here because Clinton only won it 49-46, and Biden won it by 8. But again, it's still not a county that I think Democrats are going to be too happy about, and I'll talk about that in a second. So that's kind of why Biden, he also did very well in Allegheny County, which did swing to the left from 2016, and Clinton actually did pretty well there too. Allegheny, most people don't know this, but Allegheny was one of the few counties in Pennsylvania, along with maybe two others out of the 50 or 60 counties in the state, that Clinton did better than Obama in. And that's mostly because she outran him by a lot in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. She did about the same in the city itself, but in the suburbs she did really well. And so Biden kind of continued that. I don't think I think he might have actually underperformed her in the city proper of Pittsburgh, probably by like 1% or something tiny, but he did significantly better than her in the suburbs because of left trends. And so that's essentially why we saw Allegheny get better for Joe Biden. He beat Trump by over 20 points here. And in the Senate race, Fetterman beat Oz by like 28, I think. So Allegheny is a county that's looking pretty good for Democrats. But for Republicans, kind of the opposite point of view here, they need to win Pennsylvania by just eroding Democratic margins. They're not going to if Trump wins Pennsylvania next year, he might flip. I mean, he'll probably flip Northampton. He'll probably flip Erie, and he might flip Bucks. But again, it's mostly about taking away margins from Democrats. So an example of that would be in, say, Lackawanna County, which, again, is overall a right-trending county. It's a working-class area, Scranton, Pennsylvania. You have your Michael Scotts of the world voting in those elections. But, like, in all seriousness, this county isn't, like, it trended 5% towards Biden in 2020, but that's kind of a mirage because, again, he was from this area. He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And that's kind of a hometown boost. And in addition to that, when you look at how it voted relative to the nation, it didn't change too much. Biden won it by 8 while winning nationwide by 4.5. Clinton won it by 3 while winning by 2. So it trended maybe 2.5 to 3 points to the left of the nation, which is decent, but it still really doesn't offset the past 15 years of politics in the county. And I think Trump won't flip this county no matter what, even in a best case scenario. But I think if he loses it by like 3, he probably wins Pennsylvania. Because, again, in 2020, Biden was able to net nearly 10,000 votes from this county. If Trump can cut that in half, that's a couple thousand votes he doesn't have to worry about. Erie County, like I said, could flip. Again, it's like county flips look cool because they like kind of show the change on a map, but they don't actually impact things too much because, again, it's not like an electoral college system by county. It's just how many votes can you net out of the counties you win. And in Erie, Biden won it, which was good for him, but he only netted 1,300 votes, or maybe 1,400 actually, out of Erie County. And so, like, yeah, Trump can flip it, and I think that'll maybe net him a couple thousand votes, which would be good for him, but it doesn't matter too much. So, and that's the same thing I'll say for Northampton. Biden only netted 1,200 votes out of the county. So if Trump flips these two counties in 2024, maybe he'll net a total of 4,000 to 5,000 votes, which, again, helps him, but not, right? Like, he lost Pennsylvania in 2020 by 70,000, 80,000 votes just by looking at these numbers. So, yeah, like, winning batches of 5,000 votes county by county helps you, and these 3 counties could alone get him maybe 20% of the way there, but the big counties are what matters. And so when you look at size of lead, Trump's strongest county, I believe, is Westmoreland. I might be wrong, but in terms of vote net, it's either York or Westmoreland. It might actually be York, but we'll talk about both. So for Westmoreland, that's a county that is directly outside of Pittsburgh. It's not really super right trending. Biden actually did 2.7% better than Clinton there, so it didn't like trend right in 2020. But I would say that it's a county that has potential to trend right. It did vote for Doug Mastriano in the governor's race, so it's definitely a very conservative area. And overall, like in 2020, Trump got 130K from this county. He could probably boost that just by increased turnout and population growth. So I'd say Westmoreland's a good way for Trump to improve, and that goes that applies to other counties, right? Like Fayette, Greene, Washington, Beaver to a lesser extent. These counties outside of Pittsburgh that are pretty Republican leaning are supplied Donald Trump with pretty significant vote margins in 2020. So, again, if he wants to win Pennsylvania, he can maybe net 20K more votes out of these counties surrounding Pittsburgh next year, and by then he's half the way there because we've gotten him maybe 45K out of the 80K or so he needs, and then the rest would have to be made up in more Democratic-leaning territory. So a good example of this would be Philadelphia, which actually is pretty concerning for Democrats because Trump did 3.5% better there in 2020 than he did in 2016, despite obviously doing worse statewide. And if that continues, he can maybe do 4% or 5% better next year. And he could, I think he could definitely crack 20 points in Philadelphia. But what I will say is that it's not a county where Trump can really improve too much because he kind of maxed out his gains in 2020. So maybe he gets to 20%, and that would cut the margin down by a couple thousand votes, but Philadelphia wouldn't be what pushes Trump over the line. And I think the best way to think about Trump getting pushed over the line is these areas kind of in here. So obviously this is kind of the most interesting part of Pennsylvania politically. Dauphin County is where Harrisburg is, and you look at The counties surrounding it, they're actually pretty left trending. Cumberland County is one of the only along with Allegheny, one of the only counties that trended left between 2012 and 2016. Clinton did better than Obama here, and Biden did very well here as well. He actually did 7% better than Clinton, so it's one of the most left trending counties in the state. But aside from Cumberland, the swings were a bit less pronounced. Perry County only 1 point, Lebanon only 2.8, and even up here, the swings weren't too favorable to Joe Biden. I think actually Trump did better in a couple counties. So I would say for Trump to win Pennsylvania, obviously not my prediction, but I think he'd have to really rack it up in these areas, excluding Cumberland. I think Dauphin, which he lost by 12,000 votes, he'd probably have to stop the bleeding there because, again, Dauphin also did trend a good amount towards Joe Biden, and he won it by 8. And I think actually Trump might have Trump only lost it by 2 in 2016. So that to me is definitely an example of a county Trump would have to stop the bleeding in. And so for me, the remaining 20, 30K votes he needs would come from increased turnout in these rural areas. And in addition to that, just stopping the bleeding in counties like Dauphin, to a lesser extent Berks, because Berks is actually not that left trending. Same with Lancaster. So again, these counties didn't really change much in terms of margin, but they did shift left. So if Trump can stop the bleeding there and stop just, having these trends really go against him, he could win Pennsylvania. So that's kind of what he has to do broadly. But the best way to look at this, I'd say, is through exit polls. So we're just going to go look at 2020 and 2016 exit polls here. So the first thing to look at is race, I would say. 81% of the electorate was white in 2016. In 2020, that number stayed the same. But you'll notice that Trump actually did a little worse by 1% with white voters. He won them by 16 in 2016. He won them by 15 in 2020. And here, again, that might not seem like a big difference. It's it's only a 1 point shift with one demographic. But again, white voters are a really big chunk of the electorate. And in addition to that, Pennsylvania is obviously a very close state. So everything helps. And for Trump, I would say if he wants to be in a position where he's favored to win Pennsylvania, he probably has to win white voters by 16 or 17. And again, he would do that through racking it up in the rural areas and having marginal swings towards him in more Republican-leaning counties that are overwhelmingly white. And then I guess the silver lining for Trump here is his improvements with Hispanic voters, and they actually made up a slightly smaller portion of the electorate in 2020. But in 2016, he lost Hispanic voters by 52, and in 2020, he lost them by 10 points less. So it's not a huge share of the electorate, but I do think that if Trump can maybe do 5% better with Hispanics and 2% better with white voters, he'd probably be able to win Pennsylvania. And then in terms of education, this was a big problem for Trump in 2020. College graduates backed Joe Biden by 15, but in 2016, they do it differently, but college graduates only backed Trump, or he only lost them by 7. So they doubled in their support of the Democratic Party, and they did, that's kind of a weird way to do it. I just realized they don't ask you whether or not you attended college, because some people could have attended college and not graduated, or not earned a degree, but whatever. The point stands that he did 8% worse with college graduates in 2020 than 2016. That definitely hurt him. And then I would say the final thing to look at is income, because in 2020, Republicans have historically done very well with wealthy voters, and in 2020, Trump only won them by a point. In 2016, he didn't do that well either, but he still won them by 5. And then he also likely carried the voters in these demographics too, but we don't have enough information for that. And then kind of just to go down here, look at more specific exit polling. When you look at the ideology of the voters, in 2016, Trump actually only lost moderates by 10, but in 2020, when you look at how moderates voted, he lost them by 17. So, again, as you can see, they're kind of the swings aren't that big. It's not like he won moderates by 5 and then lost them by 30 in the next election, but these swings really all went against him, and he can absolutely win Pennsylvania back if he can counteract that. He's obviously not a good candidate. I don't think that he's stronger than he was in 2020, but I think that the flip side of that is that Biden's also weaker than he was in 2020, because Biden's old, he's not charismatic, and he's not really popular. He has a 42% approval rating, which isn't great. Obviously, presidents have historically done very poorly when they have bad approval ratings, and even Trump lost re-election, but we've never had an incumbent running against such an unpopular opponent while also being unpopular. So I don't really think that that's a great example of how to look at things. But either way, what I'll say about Pennsylvania is that if Trump wants to win Pennsylvania, I think this is the map he's going to have to get. I kind of talked about it briefly, but this is the minimum he has to do. I have him winning it by 700 votes. Obviously, he'd like to win it by more, but it's kind of just, as you can see, my state shifts. He'd kind of have to do better in most of the state. Philadelphia and Bucks being the only counties in the immediate Philly metro area that he'd have to do better in. And again, I'd kind of expect him to do better in most of these areas to begin with, like northeastern Pennsylvania, where he did pretty poorly in 2020, all things considered. I think he can improve there. I think he can improve in these rural areas out here. Allegheny, I only swung a point to the right just because maybe urban turnout from Pittsburgh itself drops, and that keeps it where it is. But there are some left-turning counties in the southern part of the state that I think could hurt Trump and potentially cost him Pennsylvania. But if he wants to win, that's going to have to happen. He's going to have to really do well in the majority of counties and make inroads with voters, especially in Republican areas. So that's it. I'd say right now, if you asked me to give probability of Trump winning Pennsylvania, I'd say maybe 1 in 3. I wouldn't bet on it. I think he's a particular underdog. While I made this map, I had a lot of trouble getting him to a victory point, but that's what have to happen. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all.